Before you judge this message, before you say, that doesn't sound loving, I need you to hear me carefully. What I am about to reveal is not about hardening your heart. It's about understanding what really happens in the spirit realm when money changes hands on the street. My name isn't important, but my past is. I was a warlock, not curious, not dabbling. I was trained, instructed, and disciplined in occult systems most people don't even believe exist. And one of the most effective, least questioned spiritual mechanisms we used involved street beggars. Yes, beggars. I know that sounds shocking because from the outside, it looks like compassion. It looks like kindness. But in the spirit realm, not every act of giving is neutral. Some forms of giving create spiritual transactions you never intended to enter. I remember rituals where we studied human sympathy, where we learned how emotion opens doors faster than rebellion ever could. We were taught that money given under pressure, guilt, fear, or impulse carries spiritual residue. And street begging, especially aggressive, repeated begging, was one of the most effective ways to transfer that residue. Let me be clear, I am not saying helping the poor is wrong. Scripture commands generosity, but what I am exposing is this: not every beggar is just a victim of poverty, and not every request for money is spiritually clean. Some are entry points, intentionally or unintentionally tied to spiritual cycles of lack, dependency, and transfer. I've watched people give money and then walk away feeling heavy, drained, anxious, or suddenly blocked financially. That wasn't coincidence. That was a spiritual exchange they didn't discern. When I left the occult and came to Christ, this truth disturbed me deeply because good-hearted people were being spiritually taxed without ever realizing it, simply because no one taught them discernment alongside compassion. Tonight, I'm speaking because silence protects deception. By the end of this message, you'll understand why some acts of giving bring blessing and others quietly invite loss, and how to walk in generosity without opening spiritual doors that cost you peace, provision, and authority. This is not about fear. This is about wisdom, and wisdom always begins with truth. In the occult, we were taught a truth that most people never hear: money is never just money. It carries intent, emotion, and agreement. Every time money moves, something else moves with it. And street begging, especially repeated, emotionally charged begging, creates one of the most misunderstood spiritual transactions in modern society. We learned that spirits attach themselves not only to people, but to patterns. Poverty is not just a condition, It is a system, and that system survives by reproduction. When money is given impulsively, under pressure, guilt, fear, or emotional manipulation, it often reinforces the very cycle it appears to relieve. Spiritually, it strengthens dependence rather than restoration. Let me explain this clearly. In witchcraft, we understood that when someone gives without discernment, the giver often absorbs spiritual residue, feelings of heaviness, anxiety, sudden lack, or unexplained financial resistance. Meanwhile, the receiver remains trapped in the same cycle. That's not compassion producing freedom. That's a transaction that benefits darkness. I watched this happen again and again. Good hearted people would give, walk away, and feel drained. Their finances would tighten. Unexpected expenses would appear. Motivation would drop. They would say, I don't know why, but something shifted. We knew why. A door had been opened, not by generosity, but by undiscerning agreement. This is why scripture doesn't just say give. It says give wisely, cheerfully, and as led. Because not every request aligns with God's method of provision. Some requests are tied to spiritual cycles that require intervention, not cash. And hear me carefully, I am not condemning the poor. I am exposing a system that keeps both the giver and the receiver bound. True generosity restores dignity, encourages change, and aligns with wisdom. But impulsive giving, driven by guilt or pressure, often feeds the very spirit it was meant to fight. This is the hidden cost most people never see. And until it's exposed, the cycle continues, quietly draining compassion, finances, and spiritual authority from well-meaning people who only wanted to do good. One of the first things we were taught in the occult was this emotion bypasses discernment. When emotion is high, wisdom is low. And that is why emotional giving, especially on the street, is one of the enemy's favorite tools. Guilt, fear, pressure, urgency, those emotions are not neutral in the spirit realm. They are levers. We learned how easily compassion could be hijacked when it was rushed. A crying voice, a tragic story, a sense of, if I don't give right now, I'm a bad person. That internal pressure creates a moment where people stop asking, as this wise, and only think, I must relieve this feeling. And here is the truth most people never hear. Giving to relieve guilt is not the same as giving in obedience. One brings peace, the other often brings heaviness. I watched countless people give emotionally and walk away feeling unsettled, confused, drained, even anxious. They did the right thing, yet something felt wrong. That wasn't imagination. That was the result of a transaction driven by emotion instead of discernment. In the occult, we understood that spirits feed on urgency. Anything that pushes you to act now, without reflection, without peace, without prayer, is suspect. God leads with clarity and peace. Darkness pushes with pressure and confusion. This is why Scripture repeatedly warns against being moved by impulse rather than wisdom. True generosity is never rushed. It is intentional, it is calm, it is directed. Street begging often removes that calm. It forces a decision in seconds. And in that moment, many people give not because they are led, but because they are emotionally cornered. That's where spiritual leakage happens. Let me be clear again, compassion is holy. But compassion without discernment becomes vulnerability. The enemy does not need you to stop caring. He just needs you to stop discerning. Until people learn the difference, emotional giving will continue to drain well, meaning hearts, weaken spiritual authority, and reinforce cycles that never lead to restoration. And that is exactly why this method has worked for so long, because no one ever taught you what was really happening beneath the surface.